name is Kay, and this is the official Hi, I'm Mary end of series Q&A. I compiled together all your questions. I shortened it to 52 questions with several multi-part questions. There were 8 pages initially. I copied them all down. But I was able to compile them all. There were a lot of repeat questions, so I sort of just finagled them all together into a list of things. I grouped the repeating questions together. I'm not going to read out any specific names. I apologize for the lack of superb lighting. I don't own a light kit, and I'm filming this in my parents' house. I want to answer your questions, so why don't we start from the beginning. Oh, and let it be warned, I couldn't go 4 years making a horror web series and have a completely normal Q&A. So you should keep your eyes out. Question. So all of this was just a series. It wasn't real. I don't know what to tell you, pal. With my effects? How are you? Are you okay? Yes, I appreciate it, but I am doing perfectly all right. There was one comment that said teeth. Yes. How did you get such nice teeth? Again, with the teeth. Well, I grew them myself. What were your biggest inspirations for making the series? Are there any specific ARG creators and filmmakers that inspired you? Why did you want to make this? Probably my biggest inspirations were found footage horror, particularly the Slenderverse. Tons of those. I had been a very close follower of that, and I always wanted to make a web series of my own, but I hadn't thought I had the skills to do it or a good enough story. I also was hugely inspired by horror games, in particular Silent Hill. I think part of the motivator for making Hi, I'm Mary was out of spite that PT got canceled, because I was so upset. PT chilled me to my bones. I was very excited by its uniqueness. So when fucking Konami resulted in the cancellation of Silent Hills, I was very upset, and part of PT informed a lot of the household horror that informed a lot of Hi, Mary, and that's why a lot of the GoPro scenes almost feel like video games. I was doing that on purpose. I also was inspired a lot by Soma. A lot of the little glitch things and some of the monster sounds came from influences from playing Soma. Why did I want to make this? I wanted to make a series of my own. That is the biggest thing. I just wanted to put my name in the horror genre. I really wanted to take a crack at something, see if it could be any good. Also, in spite for PT. Was Hi, I'm Mary based on your personal experiences? Is this similar to stuff you went through, or was it allegorical? Did you set out with a mental health goal in mind, or did you want to just make a cool YouTube series? I hadn't had a goal to make it about this big statement about mental health. It was just kind of the idea that I started off with, the images that had formed kind of in my head. I wanted to make a cool, scary web series, and I was like, oh, let's base it off some of my own stuff. Let's mine my trauma for content. So yes, a lot of it came directly from my own personal experiences and the experiences of people I knew. How long was the idea kicking around in your head? How long did it take you to plan it before you started? And how much planning occurred before you posted the very first video? How old were you when it started? I was 19 when I posted the first video. The idea had been kicking around in my head since at least January. I posted that July in 2016. It was at least January that I had started to get ideas. I think I had ideas even before then, but I wanted to wait until I could absolutely get a sense of what I wanted. Don't be afraid to take a long time to plan. What I started to do is I started by developing the story. I started developing characters. I did several effects tests to make sure I could even do the things I wanted to do. I definitely wrote out a rough plan for the entire series before I filmed the first video, but the first video was very much a pilot of, let's see how this looks, what do I think of this? How much of the plot was done on the fly versus filled out from the beginning? Throughout the series process, I wouldn't recommend this because it's very stressful. I always seem to, I wrote a very general plan of what I wanted and how the different beats that I wanted to have happen when things would go. but I didn't write out all the specifics starting out, and I would always trust that I would know exactly what I wanted for those specifics by the time I got there. I didn't always, so that was very stressful, and that definitely prolonged some of the videos because I didn't always know what I wanted. So I highly recommend planning a little bit more before you start. But the general story had been pre-planned, so anyone who was like, she doesn't know where she's going with the story was wrong, because I did know. Did you plan for the story to unfold the way it did? How different is the final product from what you envisioned when you began? It's definitely a lot different. It was bigger in scope. The woman in white didn't exist in the original story. She was invented a little bit later on as things got bigger. I realized, wow, okay, I need a way to communicate clearly to the audience, and also to kind of balance out some of the presence of the other monsters. So thus the woman in white was invented. And so she didn't really come along until I think at least 5 or 6 episodes into the series. I started kind of playing with her. I think I never intended for it to be as VFX crazy, but as I learned more, I wanted to experiment more. And a lot of this series was very much a VFX experiment of, can I do these things? And so I would do tests beforehand to find out, is this even something I can do? Was the ending planned from the beginning? If not, then by when? I had a very, very vague sense of what I wanted the ending to be, but it was a lot more, it wasn't nearly as intense. It was a lot more of like just a confrontation between Mary and the Veiled Lady. The whole business in the garden and the presence of the crawling darkness didn't really come to be until last 8 months, because actually, no, it had to have been before then. It had to have been a little bit before then, because I knew I wanted the crawling darkness to have an influence there because of what it meant to me. It was gonna be a lot more kind of just bland and almost probably boring. I think I hadn't really filled it out. I just knew I wanted there to be a confrontation and Mary leaves semi-victorious, but I didn't really know exactly what I wanted it to look like. And then things slowly started to come together in my head as I approached it. I think I probably really finally knew exactly what I wanted by last 8 months. And then it was just, I have to plan out what I want this to look like. Did you plan the 1-year hiatus? Were the gaps between episodes intentional? No. A lot of the gaps in episodes were life things. When I first started, it was about like a month to 2 months between episodes, and that's where I had hoped, but then gradually just college got more intense and more demanding from me. And so the reason why last 8 months and Anagnoresis and Goodbye took so long were because my own personal work, my thesis work for my college, all crept up. Finding a job happened after I graduated, and then things with my job and my online school that I'm doing, like I got very, very busy. And so thankfully it did kind of work in game for all these hiatuses, and I tried my best to play them off as realistic things, because they do kind of make sense in game. Because like you can't expect someone in that situation to be posting regularly, to have the energy, to have the drive to post regularly in that situation. So while it wasn't intended, I did find a way to make it work in game. Were you waiting for people to figure out the Woman in White's puzzle, and did you work on stuff while you were waiting? The puzzle I think people are referring to, the Woman in White's puzzle, were the ones that people, the whole difference is important thing, the episode, that helped you find out what you needed to do to get her to live stream back in 2018. I know there were a few people who came late to the game who thought it was an active thing, but it had already been solved on the Reddit. Why did you enlist the live stream? It was intended to be unlisted. I had specified from the start there would be 19 videos, and if I posted the live stream, people would get confused. I probably can link that somewhere. I suppose I can make it public. I don't know. I mean, it's there in the Twitter if you want to find it, but it was always meant to be unlisted. I never chose deliberately to. It was just unlisted from the start. Did the audience have any actual impact on the story? Was there a plan in place in case the audience failed? What would the bad ending have looked like had we gotten it? The bad ending would have looked like Anagnoresis if the audience had not intervened in that moment where she had the knife to her throat, and we would have had a very bad time with the result. It would have ended right there. There would not be any interference, and Mary would have gone through with it. The audience did, I think, have somewhat of an impact on the story. I think more on a long-term basis than on a short-term. Like, I could not have gotten the ending that I did without a large amount of audience participation and without a large amount of audience engagement. I think in that vein, Mary might have ended a little differently had it never gotten any sort of like large audience. What would have happened if fans chose for Mary to stay in the house during the live stream, and how would that have affected things in the end? I think I was gunning for them to send her to the garden, but if they had voted house, I probably would have tried to stay and keep the live stream going as long as possible. Because a lot of the point of that live stream was to show how much the audience might enable her, and I think a lot of people figured that out. Did you ever expect hiimmarymary to get so much popularity? How did you react when it started to become notorious? I did not expect for it to get as big as it did. I was seriously impressed. I mean, for the first 7 months of hiimmarymary, had 6 subscribers, and 3 of them were people I knew IRL who I told about it. And so I was perfectly comfortable with it never getting big. I had always had a secret dream that it would. I was floored, and I'm still floored, and I'm so grateful that all of you are here, and I'm shocked that you even are interested. What kept you going all this time? What motivated you to tell this story? Were there ever moments you felt a lack of motivation and wanted to quit? And what gave you the push you needed to actually create something? I think what kept me going was I really don't like to leave things unfinished, and putting it publicly meant that there was that peer pressure of, I gotta finish this thing. And strangely enough, having a larger audience made me like, I can't just leave this unfinished. There's so many people that want to know the ending. There were totally moments where I felt a complete lack of motivation, where I didn't want to touch it at all. Sometimes I wouldn't touch it for weeks, especially when I was really busy with life stuff. I think the biggest motivation was just that need to see the story finished. I think that push was all right, we gotta just start even though I kind of don't want to, and then I will let my love for it carry me through. Sometimes I would be like, I'm so tired, I don't want to touch this. I found that creating lists, particularly for anagnoresis, I have a huge document that was just every little task and subtask that needed to be hit to get that, because it was so daunting. I mean, it was 36 minutes long. It was incredibly long. So I had to create something in order to keep myself from getting overwhelmed by the entire task. What was the moment that made you go, I want to do the series and post it on YouTube? Like the exact moment that made me start. I think it was, like, I think seeing more, like, I'd always wanted to make a series. I think it was realizing that I had the effects chops to do what I wanted was that moment that made me go, wait, I gotta do this now. Like, I'd had ideas rooting around from all of my spring semester at school. I had been wanting to do something. And so I tested stuff out and tried stuff. But then the moment that I was like, okay, I'm doing this, was when I realized I had a decent narrative going, and seeing stories get covered and seeing new works get uncovered and talked about was like, wait, this is my time to make something. Were there any moments where you hit a snag or changed your mind about where the story was going or being presented? I think there was some stuff I did with religious imagery that I completely nixed for the rest of it. Like, I was like, there's no reason for me to do this. Like, that started out a little bit in the first couple of videos that I was like, wait, this is dumb, but I can't really go back. Were there any story threads that got cut because they didn't fit with the story's metaphor, or that were included that you worried didn't fit with the analogy? I did, again, the like religious stuff that I was playing with that really didn't make sense with the central kind of metaphors I was playing with. How did you film the scenes where Mary was in the lake / the ocean? Can you tell us where you filmed the garden scenes? In terms of writing, shooting, planning, etc., how involved was the creative process for you? What was the overall experience like? For me, I was obviously heavily involved with everything because I did everything. I usually would start by kind of blocking out in a notebook the main points of each video. Like I would write out what the stuff I wanted to see was, what I wanted to have happen. Like, I'd write it all out. And then from there, depending on the type of video, I would either just write dialogue and start choreographing actions out, like plans of how like I wanted to move through the house. Like if it was a video like Gone, I had to choreograph stuff like that. I had to choreograph how that would happen. But if it was a video that was more of a montage like Last 8 Months, I would write out a shot list that would describe each thing. And then I would go and I would like plan what I needed for that. And then I would go and I'd just knock out filming each of those. And then from there I would put it into a timeline, and then I would do the effects for each one of those subsequences. I would bring it all into Premiere from there and do the sound editing, and then I would render that out as is. Typically, yeah, that would be how I would do each video. I'd do all of my effects editing within After Effects, and when I started, I did all of my editing in After Effects, which meant I like put everything in a sequence in After Effects, which hurt me physically because I hate doing that, but it just seemed the most efficient. It wasn't until like Last 8 Months that I actually started back and forthing frequently between Premiere and After Effects and just exporting and bringing things back. I found that it was just easier to do come the later videos, but it didn't really seem necessary to do for the early ones because I just did all the effects, then I rendered it out of After Effects and I brought it into Premiere then to do all the sound editing afterwards. Did the COVID-19 pandemic affect your decision to end the series, or was it planned beforehand? The COVID-19 pandemic had no influence over the ending of the series. It actually probably helped me because I got furloughed from my job for 2 months and I had free time. So I was able to really knock out all the stuff I wanted to do for the finale. So it probably is why it ended sooner, and I'm kind of glad I had that extra time, or we probably would not be here right now. Does your family know you do this, and do they support it? How many other people IRL know about this? My family knows what I do. They don't really know a ton about it because they're not super involved in the process. I'm just like, hey, I'm filming a thing. My mom has seen some of the videos. My sister's seen all of them, but they're not like super involved in the process. They do support and they're willing to help me by leaving the house when I need it empty. Other than that, there's maybe a handful of my friends IRL who know about this. Most people don't. I just don't tell people. I don't know, telling people that you make horrifying found footage online doesn't always get the best reaction. Did you put any money into creating hiimmarymary? Starting out, I had a pretty small budget, but then I think the biggest times I spent money were on software plugins. Hotshot Code in particular, which, while it did help, it took a chunk out of my bank account. But I'd say like the biggest things I spent money on were SFX makeup. I ended up caving and buying a green screen part of the way through the process so I didn't have to rotoscope the shadow guy constantly. But yeah, there was some money into it, but it wasn't like this huge thing. That does not mean you need money to create something good. So just let that be known. Did you truly do this all by yourself? Did you have anybody helping you out with this series? Who are they? I would say like the majority of the series was done entirely by me. The only times I ever had people helping me were during the filming process when I needed physically another body with me. Or when I needed someone to come with me to maybe an abandoned location because I should not really be going to those places by myself. So, for example, I had the veiled monster had other people in costume sometimes. Usually it was played by me, but I had both a friend of mine and my sister play the veiled lady on 2 separate occasions. My sister played the veiled lady in a couple of times, like in hide and seek. She played the shot where the veiled monster is looming over Mary. That's her in the costume. My friend was the veiled monster for Gone, and she did a fantastic job nearly murdering me. Made it look very realistic, and I can't thank her enough for that. And then I had a friend who would come with me oftentimes to some of the abandoned locations. She came with me to the garden more than once. She showed me where that abandoned car was in rain. So I had a few friends helping me out for the filming process, but other than that, everything else was done by me. Did you ever get scared making the videos? There were a few times I definitely got jumpy because I was in my house in the dark by myself, and I think you inevitably get jumpy when your house makes rumbles or you hear something upstairs and you're like, is that a person? Am I alone in here? Or when you're in your basement and your basement kind of growls at you. But other than that, I think I was pretty okay. A lot more times there were more lights on than it was clear because my camera just didn't pick up the light very well. So there were a lot more lights on in some of the scenes than I think some people realize. Did you ever have to deal with game jacking? What are your thoughts on game jacking in general? And would you allow someone else to make something similar to your series? I never really had to deal with someone game jacking my series. Like, I never had anyone stealing parts of my videos or claiming to be... There was someone who commented on the blog under the name Outside that fooled a lot of people. And I didn't even realize they had commented. So a whole bunch of people went down a rabbit hole of thinking they were involved in the story, and they weren't. And I had to be like, hey, this is not attached to me. This is someone pretending to be a part of the series. I think if anything, there's a couple of people trying to be me on like TikTok. I've noticed there's someone on TikTok using hiimmarymary and like reposting some of the videos. That's not me. I don't know who that is, but it's not me. There's someone on Instagram. The only canon Mary accounts are the Mary Blogspot, Mary's Twitter, and the YouTube channel. Nothing else is in-game. Everything else is someone else trying to be Mary, and that's not. I don't like game jacking. While it's flattering, you can make your own thing. Don't steal someone else's work and try to pass it off as your own, or don't pretend to be involved in somebody else's game. Would you allow someone else to make anything similar? Obviously, like, I mean, it's similar concepts, but like, don't steal my characters. Like, don't make stuff in the universe. It's not like an open universe. It's my project. So just be respectful. I think I want to keep it its own closed thing. Like, I don't want to like make this like cinematic universe. Like I don't want it to become like a big Slenderverse kind of thing, if you catch my drift. Why did you choose to stay anonymous? Should we call you Kay, or can we call you by your real name? How many subs until face reveal? You've already seen my face, but you're not going to see a lot more of it. I'm doing that on purpose. There's a reason why I don't really want there to be a ton of connections to my face. I chose to stay anonymous just because I've seen how invasive sometimes being known online can be, and how I didn't really want my real job to connect with this. Like, I wanted employers to Google me and find my work and not this. I wanted to create somewhat of a split between those two things. Should we call you Kay, or can we call you by your real name? You don't know my real name, so I would prefer if you called me Kay. Was it hard to keep silent about the project all this time and not respond to folks on social media over the years? It wasn't hard, really, at all. It was pretty easy because I didn't want to get doxxed. I mean, the Kay account on Tumblr basically functioned as a way to contact me, the creator, so that I wouldn't have a problem where people couldn't... Like, the Kay account was created because of the whole Marina Joyce situation, and I didn't want there to be some confusion. I didn't want people to worry that Mary wasn't safe, like people who had trouble distinguishing whether it was real or not. So I did that to clear that up. Did you see Film Theory's video? How was that? Was Matt Pat right? What are your thoughts on people's theories? What is the true meaning? Was it based on mental health? Can you clear up what the monsters represent? What did the garden mean? Here is my spiel on theories. I appreciate all of the theories, and I'm gonna have my own personal meaning, but that does not mean that everyone else's theory is wrong. Like, that's what art is. Like, you find your own meaning in art. Like, I will say that everyone kind of got vaguely what it was about, but I'm gonna have my own personal meaning that isn't gonna be the same, and I'm not gonna go crazy. Obviously, big mental health themes. I would say, I'm not gonna go and say this was wrong and that was wrong, because I encourage people to find their own meanings in the video. Like, I've seen so many people, there are people who commented on the Q&A announcement saying, this series helped me make my first step towards therapy. And to that I say, brava, good, I'm so happy for you. So I'm not gonna say that if you found something that helped you, that that's not what it meant. Like, that's just not what it meant to me. Like, when I disappear from the universe, the project will still stay up and it will still mean something to somebody. So I am not gonna really go and say this was right and this was wrong. I will say that the garden, which was pretty argued over, to me was very much like an escapism, any sort of thing you use to get away from your problems, whether that be drugs, whether that be alcohol, whether that be just something you take comfort in to hide away from the world, whether it's compulsive exercise, whether it could be anything. The garden was a lot broader than I think, for me. I think I'm not gonna go out and say there is a true meaning, just that there is my meaning as the author. Which theory was closest to your interpretation? I would probably say closest to mine is Nick Nocturne's. What was the wildest theory you saw? There was one theory out there that claimed that Hi, I'm Mary Mary is set in the Alan Wake universe. That one was pretty wild. There's one that someone claimed that I genuinely thought that social media likes can cure depression. I don't know where you got that from. So those are probably the wildest ones. Was Mary being trapped in a house purely allegory, or were the paranormal events in the house actually happening? Porque no los dos. Was it an actual physical space that Mary got yoinked to? Excellent choice of words. After she got kicked out of the car? I'm gonna go with, for clearing things up, like yes and no. And that doesn't clear things up at all. But that's kind of what this is supposed to be. A week before Mary got yoinked again, her emotions were affecting electronics and a creature was spotted outside the car. Liz didn't refute this, so it can be assumed that it wasn't just Mary and that Liz could see the effects of this too. Yes, your friends can often see the effects of things taking hold on you, even if you don't want to admit it. Why did Mary think it was her parents' house? Out of game, this is the only place I could film. In game, our parents' houses are often a place for great psychological development as we grow and go through adolescence and our childhood, so it's often a big place for us. Can you tell us more about Mary's backstory? All I will say about Mary's backstory is the only things that I will make canon are the things that you can hear in the blog posts, in the audio of the blog posts. Those are the canon Mary backstory things. So if you want to know more about her backstory, go and dig through the blog, because that's the biggest place that you will find that information. I can't fucking read it. I didn't think this through. The glitches at the end, what did it mean? Well, to answer that question, I will read another question. Is the darkness that crawls on Mary's face just before the video ends a sign that what happened will always be a part of her? What influenced the monster designs? How did you come up with them / create their designs? Did you have actual names for them? So each of the monsters were created by different things. The crawling darkness was entirely just something that came into my mind and scared the fuck out of me. Maybe it had a little bit of influence from the mold from Resident Evil 7. A little bit of influence there, not really. The Veiled Lady took inspiration from one part Pyramid Head, one part Kayako from The Grudge, because The Grudge has never failed to scare the piss out of me every single time. It's one of the most consistently frightening horror films to me. The Hiimmarymary had some influences in Marble Hornets, Masky. That was one influence, but also just broken dolls and creepy mannequins were a lot of influences for her. The Shadow Monster was unique, and it was very much little fears I had that were from completely mundane things at night, like going to your bathroom in the dark and then opening your door and being like, oh god, there's something standing there at the bottom of the stairs, or gee, I sure hope that turning around to close my door at the middle of the night, there's not going to be something standing there. So those were kind of the biggest influences there. Did you have actual names for them? I had some working names. I deliberately tried to avoid naming them while the series was ongoing so that people could create their own names for them, which people really did, and that was really impressive. I oftentimes called the Veiled Lady Queen Bitch was one of them, but really it was Boss Monster, because she was kind of in charge of all of them. There was Shadow Guy. For the longest time, I referred to the Crawling Darkness just as the Crawly for my own purposes in my journal as I wrote things down. And then there was just Hiimmarymary, the Mirror Monster. Do you know about Sanders Sides, and have you seen it? I have now heard about Sanders Sides because many of you have informed me about it and the similarities to Hiimmarymary. I have not watched it, But it's cool to know that Thomas Sanders is doing something kind of similar. But I have not seen it, no. Since this was largely solo, how did you approach acting for the series? Was it difficult to get in the right headspace to act the way you needed to? I mean, I did theater in high school, so I had had some experience acting, but honestly, acting with a camera on was an entirely different game. I don't know what it was, but it definitely was difficult because I get very self-conscious that I was acting right in front of a camera. It was easier acting running found footage with, like, when I was holding the camera than it did when the camera was pointed at me. Like in something like Gone, that was very situational, so you were just kind of in the moment improvising. But I kind of, when I had tried to approach it, I tried to work myself into a certain headspace to do things. Sometimes it was just like that and I'd do it. Other times it was a lot harder.
What would you say to people going through the same thing as Mary? Did anyone reach out to you because they weren't okay? I didn't have anyone reach out to me because they weren't okay. My advice, if you're going through something similar, is I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not going to be equipped to give the best advice, so I would say seek out a professional, seek out a support system.
Hey, it's Kay again. I just want to jump in here for a second and add just a little bit more because I don't think I explained this very well when I was recording it. I'm never going to have the perfect advice to apply to everyone when it comes to a mental health crisis, so I stand by my saying that reaching out for help is the best place to start. But I also want to mention and acknowledge the several people who commented on the hiimmarymary videos and on the Q&A saying that watching hiimmarymary helped them reach out to a therapist or ask for help or make progress in their own mental health journey. And I am so happy to hear that, and each comment in that vein made me tear up a little bit, but I want to congratulate you, most of all. Despite all that media out there that we take comfort in, it was you who took that first step. You who reached out, and you deserve to be proud of yourself for that, and you owe yourself some kindness and love. I may have helped, but you did that. Keep fighting. We'll get there. Okay, woo. All right. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Any tips for ARG/web series makers that are just starting out? You're not always going to feel like you know what you're doing, but that doesn't mean stop. How relevant were the SD cards to the plot? Did she end up in the house after the events of clip number 4? Yes, she did end up in the house after the events of clip number 4. The SD cards provided a backstory and a little more depth into Mary's life. What did Mary see at the end of the last SD card audio clip? She saw, and I'm very comfortable saying that because I think I didn't show the sound effects as loudly as I could have because you can hear it kind of at the end there, but I don't think I indicated that well enough. I think I layered too much distortion on it, so it's not super clear. So yeah, she saw the crawling darkness at the end of that clip. Was the woman in white Liz? No, Liz was a completely separate person that was pretty much confined to the SD cards. Did Mary have her arm broken and gone? She had her hand, the bones in her hand were crushed. When Mary gets out of the house, could she see other people? My personal intent is that yes, she could, but that's really kind of left up to the viewer. Any plans for an epilogue? No. I think it will be finished where it's finished. What community response surprised you the most? I think I was most surprised that there was a response at all. I think I am deeply touched when someone comes to me and says that my series helped them. It always deeply fuels me. I am just so happy that that has an effect and that other people were able to relate to it. Oh, now that I think of it, I did have people reach out to me after Gone asking me if I was okay because it was so intense. I do remember that. The community response that surprised me the most was just seeing people rally around Mary in that last tweet, like seeing people responding to that tweet, engaging to the now tweet, the woman in white's instructions. That was very exciting. And seeing people do that, and also seeing people in the live stream and seeing people trying desperately to gather people to tell her to not go to the garden and that there were people trying to get it, and seeing that it was wild to see the community being like, why did you vote garden, you cowards? Like that was insane, because that's exactly what I wanted to have happen, because there's something to be said about enabling someone. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. It was pretty cool. I think the message got through there.
Are there any good bloopers you can never unsee? What was the funniest one? Well, you'll see them all when I put the blooper reel up on YouTube very, very soon. But the best one was when my friend who was playing the Veiled Lady during Gone actually punched me in the face by accident. We got that on tape. It's funny. How did you do all the editing? Where did you learn it? And are you self-taught? I had some skills with After Effects previously from some school stuff I had learned in high school, but a lot of the effects and things that I learned to do was primarily self-taught. I watched a lot of tutorials. That's kind of adds a little tip there. Don't be afraid to play around in an effects software. If you're trying to learn how to do effects, don't be afraid to fuck around and make stuff that you're never going to show to anybody. A lot of what created The Crawling Darkness was me just fucking around and finding out. Don't be afraid to do tests. Don't be afraid to play. Never stop playing when you're making art online. What was the hardest special effect you had to pull off? The last sequence in the garden in Anagnoresis with The Crawling Darkness in it took the most time of any sequence I'd worked on ever because there was motion tracking involved. It took 40 hours to render some of the versions of The Crawling Darkness. So I eventually just created a alpha channel of The Crawling Darkness that lasted for 3 minutes and just started repeating it in places because I could not fathom attempting to render a full 60 frames per second GoPro video motion tracked with The Crawling Darkness in it, because I think I would have died. Which special effect are you most proud of? Again, The Crawling Darkness. I am just in love with that thing. I feel like it was my favorite thing to work on. Particularly, not just The Crawling Darkness in general, but that last sequence in Anagnoresis where the house is just like insane and crazy. That whole sequence I'm really, really proud of. I think I teared up when I watched it. I was like really, really happy when I watched it back that it did exactly what I wanted it to do, and that can be hard to achieve when you're an amateur VFX person. And it hit everything I wanted it to do, and I was really happy about it. What was your favorite Foley recording to do? Favorite Foley recording? Does screaming multiple times in my basement count to have like a backlog of screams because I'm bad at acting and just felt like I'd layer in my own screams. Also going to town on some celery to make bone cracking noises. I just sat in front of my microphone and just cracked it. And also eggshells. I just like crushed eggshells. What was your favorite moment filming the series? I'd say filming Gone with my friend was really, really neat because we only could do it in one night. Based on her schedule and my schedule, we had that one night to do it. I had to speed choreograph all the scenes. I kind of knew what I wanted ahead of time, but I think that what we managed to put together, it was really neat filming it. Which video is your favorite? I'd say just from all the things I needed from it, I'd say Anagnoresis is. Just because of how much work went into it, it's just kind of like I feel like I got everything I wanted out of it. Which episodes were the easiest to make and why? I'd say, well, the actual easiest to make was Collection. That was just text on screen and took me 2 seconds. I was so happy that I had a video that was really quick. Easiest to make, I liked to group the videos together they were either montages or they were real time. Anagnoresis is mostly a real time video because it was all happening as it was going. But something like, technically Hello, Last 8 Months, when there's multiple sequences of different things happening at different times, that's what I would group them. There was like the montages and there were the real-time videos, like Gone was a real-time video, Worse was a real-time video, but that's just like how I saw them. So a lot of the montages were usually easier to do because they were often a lot more still shots and they weren't crazy found footage flailing. Let's see, which episode was the hardest to make and why? Probably Anagnoresis because it took so fucking long to motion track everything. If you're working with a GoPro, pro tip, maybe don't set it to the 60 frames per second thing if you're planning to do a lot of motion tracking, because it will track all 60 frames per second. And that takes a really long time, especially if you decided to film in the woods in autumn where everything is the same color. I hated that. Which one was the most fun to make? I would say Gone was one of the most fun because it involved a friend. Because a lot of that was a event, I had a friend over to film it. Is there any music you enjoy listening to that helped inspire you during the series or helped you while working? Early in the series, I listened to very different things that I listened to late in the series, because what I listened to just after freshman year of college versus what I listened to a couple of months ago is very, very different. But I often found I worked well listening to a lot of the weirder ambient stuff while I edited, because it helped me focus, particularly when I was rotoscoping creepy ambient music while I worked. I know I did build that Mary mix that I told people about, and that was one of the things that helped me kind of gather together some of my themes and say, oh, this, and it doesn't even make sense to everyone. What's something in hiimmarymary that you feel the audience may have missed out on or didn't quite understand? I didn't do a good enough job communicating the meaning of the crawling darkness and how it relates to Mary. I think this was my failure as a storyteller. It shows up a lot more than a lot of people realize, and that there are a lot of just hidden moments where it's present, particularly in Do Not Touch. Some of the stuff in collection and in the blog relating back to the crawling darkness and how Mary reacts to the crawling darkness versus the other ones. But that's also because the crawling darkness has a very personal meaning to me. I think I didn't communicate that as much as a storyteller. I tried to do a few things that were deliberate callbacks to previous episodes. There is a lot of similarity between the garden sequence in Anagnoresis and the back half of Do Not Touch. That was very, very deliberate because it was a similar scene with a very different outcome. I don't want to say the audience missed it, because if the audience missed it, it's because I probably didn't really communicate it hard enough. I wish I had seen more digging into the blog and the meanings of the interactions, because that's kind of an important part of Mary's backstory.
Since you began 4 years ago, I was wondering if you had any regrets regarding anything story or character-wise. Is there anything you would change about it in reflection, and what would you tell your younger self? I think if I regret anything, for one, I regret putting the code in The Darkness Moves. There was really no reason for it to be there, and it really didn't really enhance much plot-wise. If there's anything else I would change, maybe I would have found a way to not even put my face in it so that I could keep up a bit more anonymity. I know it's cool being in front of a camera, but it's also weird and parasocial and strange. What would you tell your younger self? Don't fucking put the code in The Darkness Moves. Oh! Mask out the hand in Good Night, because I forgot it. Now you're gonna go look back at it and you're gonna see that it's not there, and I see it every time I watch it. Sincerely, if I could tell something sincerely to my younger self, I would say, keep doing what you're doing. It's gonna be worth it eventually. And that's something to tell any young creator, that if you don't stop, if you keep working and keep developing and keep growing and you don't give up on that, people will start to see your skill. You just have to keep pushing. I mean, I had 6 subscribers for 7 months, and I was perfectly happy with that. I could tell anything to my younger self. Don't inherently trust that you're gonna know that plot line when you get to that video. Sometimes you need to do a little bit more pre-production than that. What is your favorite piece of horror media? I hate having to pick things. I think that there's just so much out there. I mean, if I had to pick a genre, I could pick cosmic horror. I always come back to cosmic horror, which is relevant, interestingly. What is a big thing in ARG/YouTube horror that you'd like to see more of? Practical effects. By far, I want to see more practical effects. Watch Daisy Brown. That series does it really well. I want to see, I know it sounds weird from me who's like, After Effects, yay. But I have, with that knowledge of VFX, I have a deep appreciation for practical effects in series. And anytime I see something pulled off and I find out, wow, that was practical, I get so impressed with it. I would love to see more people pull off neat practical effects, because it's also just very, very creative the way people do things. I mean, have you seen The Thing? That's what I want to see. I want to see more
practical effects and more monsters. More practical effect monsters. Practical effect monsters look so cool. Advice or tips to future creators. Learn to make your perceived weaknesses into your strengths. Like, learn to work within what you've been given, like, and don't make yourself feel bad if you can't pull something off. Like, learn to twist the things that you think are working against you into a benefit. For example, in my case, I knew I wouldn't have a lot of friends around, so I set my series and played all the characters, and that was thematically relevant. Of course, I didn't play all the characters all the time, but, like, you get what I mean. If all you have is a flip phone, don't beat yourself up. Like, work with the flip phone and make a neat flip phone series. Like, work with that kind of old digital style. Like, there's a lot to go off of. There is no reason why not being able to afford a Sony A7S should stop you from trying to be creative. Like, you can create good stuff with very little budget, and that you don't have to have fancy VFX. You don't have to have all of these computer glitch stuff to tell a good story. Personal recommendation, this is not for everyone, work under a pseudonym. It's just easier. It's easier if you need to reboot yourself. It's easier so people don't send things to your house, especially if you're a really young creator. If you're like a minor and you want to make a series, I would recommend it just for your safety on the internet. Last question. What are your future plans? Are you going to make another series? Are there going to be any videos on this behind the scenes channel? Regarding the behind the scenes channel, I will be posting a few things here and there about hiimmarymary behind the scenes stuff. There is a blooper reel coming up. I just have to finish editing it together. It's going to be long. I'll make a premiere out of it. I hope it'll be funny. I thought it was funny. I want to do a couple of little tutorial breakdowns. I want to do a sequence breakdown. I would love to have you guys pick a sequence of your choice, and I will go into my After Effects file. It's the choosing part that I don't really know how I plan to do. If you guys have a scene that you really liked, that you'd love to see me break down the VFX for it, let me know in the comments. I haven't figured out how I'm gonna do this, if it's like a doodle poll that people will vote on. I'm figuring it out. I will get back to you. I have a lot going on, so it may take a little while. I do want to do stuff with the behind the scenes channel. As for whether you're making another series, yeah, I am. I couldn't just not. Originally I wasn't going to, but then I got an idea and it stuck with me, and it hasn't gone away since November of 2019. And I've been developing it, and I've been working on it, and in fact, throughout this entire video, I've been telling you about it. If you have a keen eye, you've probably noticed that some of the things in this video kind of stick out. Don't really look like they're supposed to be there. You've probably questioned, what is that doing in there? Why are those there? Those aren't supposed to be there. If you go back and find them all, it'll tell you a little bit about the kind of themes and the things you'll see and the kind of aesthetics I'm looking for. Nothing directly plot related. I've also snuck a link to a mood board on a Tumblr account. If you're clever, you'll be able to find it. I will confirm it on Twitter. If you ping me and you're saying, hey, is this blog your mood board? This is one of the times that I'll actually tell you, yes, this is the mood board. It's not in game, it's out of game, but it's constantly updating, and it's just a little peek into my pre-production process. Once I start doing more development and I'm closer to actually doing stuff with that new project, you're going to start seeing teasers and trailers, which should tell you a little bit about the new format. It's going to be very different than what I did previously. I want to try something a little bit different. It's still horror. It's still very much horror. But the format I'm going to do it in is going to let me do some things that I wouldn't normally be able to put on YouTube, and let that function as kind of a hint as well. That's all of the questions. Thank you for sitting through however the fuck long this was. I really, really appreciate you guys, and thank you for coming along with me as I made a series in 4 years. I really, really appreciate you being here, and I can't thank you enough. I couldn't have made this as cool as it was without you guys. And so yeah, I guess that's it. And for some of you, you have a Tumblr link to look for. Happy hunting!